Alright mates, how's it going? Originally, you were going to be treated to someone else doing the voiceover for this video. Skull Shorties very kindly took time out of his schedule to record himself reading my script because my voice is a little bit messed up. However, I underestimated how much of a control freak I am, and it felt really weird having someone else voice my video. But since Skull took the time to actually record the entire video for me, I'm still going to put his plug for his channel at the end. Please do go over to his channel and check out his machinimas and stuff. In today's video, I'm covering Ghosts of Draenor and Coilfang Reservoir from Chronicle Volume 3. So let's go! Now that the Legion's hold on Hellfire Peninsula was taken care of, the Horde decided to switch its focus to Illidan's fell orcs that were hanging about at Hellfire Citadel. This assault was personal. These ferocious red-skinned orcs were a reminder of the old Horde, something the new Horde didn't particularly want to be reminded of, because they were probably a little bit embarrassed by the whole thing. Now, full disclosure, I wrote the script for this video on Tuesday evening, and only discovered then that the Horde do Hellfire Citadel at this point in the story. My bad. As much as I'd love to go into great detail about the whole thing, it's 3 bloody dungeons and a mini raid, and we've got a fair bit of stuff to cover in this video, so we're just going to kind of gloss over it a little bit. But don't start accusing me of being some kind of Horde-hating jerk, because I'm not. I promise. Anyway, Horde champions entered Hellfire Ramparts first. They fought their way through an army of fell orcs and some bosses, but something just didn't seem right. The numbers of these fell orcs seemed to be growing. But why? Next, they went up to the Blood Furnace. They fought even more bosses, and it was at this point they learned that the Pit Lord Magtheridon had been entrapped at the heart of the Citadel, and they were using its blood to create all these fell orc twats, which is bloody outrageous. After that, they headed into the Shattered Halls, and it was a little bit sad, man. They carved their way through to the Hall of Blades and encountered a familiar face, a Horde legend, Kargath Bladefist, chieftain of the Shattered Hand clan. Unfortunately, he was now also the war chief of the Fell Horde, and he was beyond saving, because he'd gone a bit mental. So they had to fight him. The key mechanics in this fight were basically to just make sure everyone was as spread out as possible to avoid taking multiple hits from Kargath's Blade Dance ability, and to try and balance DPS between Kargath and the adds that just started randomly getting involved. They downed Kargath, and all that was left was to head into Magtheridon's lair. A couple more champions joined them for that though, because it was a 25-player raid. Composition was important for this fight. Just imagine you can see 5 tanks and 7 healers on the screen. Magtheridon himself was inactive for the first 2 minutes of the fight, but there were 5 Hellfire Channelers dotted about the room, next to Mantracon cubes, which I'll explain in a minute. The Hellfire Channelers needed to be killed pretty quickly, or at least 3 of them anyway. Phase 2 started when Magtheridon joined the fight. The Horde champions continued to kill off the remaining Channelers, and then focused on nuking the Pit Lord. Also in Phase 2, a new mechanic was added to the mix, and it sounds bloody awful. Every 60 seconds, Magtheridon would start to cast Blast Nova. This needed to be interrupted, or else everybody would die. In order to interrupt Blast Nova, all 5 Mantracon cubes needed to be clicked by players simultaneously. This is what I like to call an impossible to pug mechanic. This was made even more annoying and difficult by another of Magtheridon's abilities, Quake. Basically, Quake happened every 50 seconds, and it caused a knockback to players every second for 7 seconds, which can kinda get in the way of trying to interrupt Blast Nova. In Phase 3, things got even more fun. First the roof crashed down, which dealt a shitload of damage and stunned everyone for 2 seconds. Luckily, this didn't coincide with a Blast Nova, or else the champions would have died, because that's a thing that can happen. For the remainder of the fight, the roof would randomly cave in once in a while, and it was important to not be stood in that spot, because you'd die. But as always, the Horde champions knew what they were doing, and struck Magtheridon down. Although they were pleased that the Pit Lord would never again taint the Orc race, the Horde wasn't exactly in a celebratory mood. Even if they were fell orcs, it hadn't felt great killing so many of their kin. But things weren't all doom and gloom. Thrall, for example, was having a whale of a time. He'd never been to his ancestral home. He was born on Azeroth, despite what the movie says. In all fairness, there wasn't much left of old Draenor, but there was one place that was relatively untouched considering the planet exploded. The region of Nagrand was steeped in ancient Orcish culture. It was also where the largest community of Magar dwelled, in a village called Garuda, which was named after Thrall's late grandfather. But that wasn't what really got Thrall crying his eyes out. The village was watched over by an old woman called Gaia, and she just so happened to be Thrall's grandma. Gaia provided him with a lot of information about his parents, his people, even himself. However, Gaia wasn't the only person to watch over Garuda. The village was led by a promising young orc called Garrosh Hellscream, son of the legendary Grommash Hellscream. Garrosh had no idea of his father's deeds on Azeroth. He only knew of the mistakes his father had made that led to the corruption of his people. So as far as he was concerned, his dad was a dick. But Thrall told him that his father died a hero. Grommash sacrificed himself to defeat Manaroth, and he lifted the blood curse that afflicted his people. And Garrosh was like, well, that doesn't really undo all the terrible things he did leading up to that, but okay. Thrall saw a lot of great potential within Garrosh. Sure, he was brash and quick to anger, but his fierce pride and knowledge of Orcish culture would serve the Horde well. So he was like, hey, why don't you come back to Azeroth with me? You can be my advisor. I have a really good feeling about you. The idea of you going mental and randomly becoming a villain for no reason seems highly unlikely to me. Meanwhile, Thrall wasn't the only person attempting to reconnect with his people. Rexxar had accompanied the Horde to Outland because he wanted to see if his Thrall buddies were still alright. He'd spent a long time thinking they were dead, so he was pretty emotional when he found out that they were living among the jagged peaks of the Blade's Edge Mountains. And he was even more emotional when he discovered who was leading them. Leorox, his daddy. Years ago, him and his dad had fallen out big time. Leorox hadn't been a big fan of the old Horde, and was kind of pissed off when Rexxar decided to join it. The last time these two had spoken, they'd exchanged some pretty harsh words, like "f*** you," and "pretty chair like sausage rolls." Problem was, time had not healed those wounds, and Rexxar was too proud to face his father. But he did everything in his power to help the Thrall fend off their enemies within the region anyway, because he's nice like that. Meanwhile again, both the Alliance and the Horde had forged into the murky swamp of Zangarmarsh. The Draenor that had joined the Alliance were eager to go reunite with those they'd left behind on Outland, so it didn't take long for the Alliance forces to gather at the Sanctuary of Tel'Rador. It was at this point that the Alliance learned many unsettling things. The region was deteriorating quickly. Disease was spreading, food sources were vanishing, nearby tribes of Broken were disappearing, everything was going to shit. Lady Vash and her Naga were to blame. That much was clear. They needed to be stopped, and the Alliance didn't hesitate. The champions head out and stormed into the Naga's watery fortress, Coilfang Reservoir. And just like Hellfire Citadel, this is made up of 3 dungeons and a raid. Firstly, the Alliance head into the slave pens to help the enslaved Broken. Then they fought their way through the Underbog and the Steam Vault, coming across all sorts of weird stuff, like diseased wildlife and Lady Vaj's most fearsome Naga warriors. Eventually, they entered Serpent Shrine Cavern, the lair of Lady Vaj herself, and 5 other bosses, but who cares about them? Actually no, there's one that's kind of funny. Before heading to fight Lady Vaj, the Alliance champions decided to take a break and do a bit of fishing. They stood around a pool, fished, told stories. It was lovely, really relaxing, and oh my god! Once that big bastard was taken care of, it was time to fight the Coilfang matron herself. Now this is one of those fights where Phase 1 and 3 are really straightforward, but Phase 2 can go terribly wrong. Although Lady Vash hit pretty freaking hard, the first part of the fight was basically a tank and spank, but when Lady Vash was down to about 70% health, she ran to the middle of the platform and shielded herself. Like a bloody coward. In order to deactivate the shield, the Alliance champions needed to kill tainted elementals for their tainted cores, and use the cores on 4 shield generators, but also defend themselves against a number of elite adds at the same time. Positioning was key. Some of the elite adds needed to be grabbed by the tank quickly, whilst others needed to be kited away from the fight. Once the shield was deactivated and Vash's health was down to about 50%, Phase 3 started. It was pretty much the same as Phase 1, except random spore bats would spawn. They had a poison AoE attack, so it was important to try and manage their numbers and avoid getting too overwhelmed. Otherwise there's just too much poison, and everybody dies. Eventually, Lady Vaj fell. With her death, Coilfang Reservoir was no longer a threat. It would take time for the region to truly heal, but Tel'Rador's inhabitants were now safe to expand out across Zangarmarsh. Both the Horde and the Alliance had managed to deal a significant blow to Illidan in this video, and as you may imagine, everyone's favourite Storm Rage was now starting to get a little bit desperate. And we're leaving it there! In the next Volume 3 video, Khadgar tries to get the assault on the Black Temple started, however the Blood Elves decide to attack Tempest Keep first. But after that, a unified army of Horde and Alliance do the Black Temple raid. That is, if I can fit all of that into one video. We'll see.
Go ahead and check out my channel, Skull Shorties, in the meantime. We do a lot of lore speculation on World of Warcraft over there.
If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and...
See ya!